So we're back, and we're going to cut the bench dog slots first. I used my little guide that I made on the last episode, and then chiseled out the excess from both sides. I kind of get halfway on each side, and then I flip it up on edge and flatten off the bottom of each one of them. Well, what's the bottom here would be the side once it's in place. I did the same thing to the other side. I decided to go ahead and put dog holes down both sides since my bench sits out in the middle of the room. And I'll have access all the way around, though one side won't have a vise yet. But I may add one later on, you never know. So I decided to go ahead and put them in there. When I did the other side, I actually kind of cheated when I got to this part. Instead of flattening with the chisel, I took a router and set it to depth and flattened them off that way. So the other side looks nicer than that one did. Then it was on to the legs. And I cut the bottoms first. Or excuse me, cut the tops first. And then I cut the bottoms a little differently, but you'll see here. That little Harbor Freight saw guide was a lifesaver on this one. I marked the lines with my chisel because at this point I didn't have a marking knife. But by the time the for this project was done, I now have a marking knife, although it won't show up until the next video. And those four legs weigh more than the top by a lot. That's why I had such a hard time flipping them over. Getting everything set. Second cut. And then the last half inch I just cut with the handsaw. A little bit of block planing, get that meat in the middle out. Then I had to turn the heavy sucker around. Which wasn't near as bad as flipping it, by the way. So on this side, I set up the guide like before, and I made one pass, and then I unclamped everything and used the little cross-cut guide to make 3 more cuts on each leg, and there was just a little half-inch square in the middle that I was able to cut with the handsaw. And then a little block plane on each one, and done. That was the bottoms of them. Worked out fine. I kind of figured that with the 200 pounds of top sitting on top of these 4 legs, they're probably going to get pushed to the floor no matter what's going on underneath this table. So, once I got them all cut, I started to mark out the pins, then realized I should probably cut the tails first and then mark the pins off of the tails. But when I was working on this first one, that big split right there kind of annoyed me, so I decided to glue it up, and that postponed me working on that leg, and that made me think, oh, maybe I should do the tails first, and so I switched to that. But just clamped him up and wiped off the excess and set him aside. So here's one of the end rails, and I start marking out the dovetails on it. So the dovetail is actually a cube on the end of it, I mean in cross section, on the end of the thing. Rather than going the full width, I went and cut a ½ inch off the back of it here. You'll see when I go to cut them, so that I make that pretty obvious. And I put the little crosshatch marks on there to make sure I didn't cut the wrong thing anywhere. So here we go, bandsaw. Easy way to cut the dovetails, at least when they're this big. I suppose you could do it with smaller ones, though I never have. You just got to make sure you cut in the right order, or you end up with space underneath the blade. It's not good. So there it is. Simple way to do it. I had 7 more to cut after that one. And then it was time to start marking out the pins. So, you know, they're more like pockets at this point than pins. But anyway, we'll call them dovetail pockets. Anyway, I marked 3 inches up on each leg, and then laid my piece between them and made sure it was square to the 2 pieces before actually using my chisel again as a marking knife, and marked them out. And then I had made this marking gauge earlier and decided to go ahead and use it to mark my depths. So I'm actually going to show you 2 of the 8 of these that I cut out. This is the first one, and each one after that became more and more of a learning curve or learning experience, and my rate at which I could do one changed drastically. The first one actually took me about 45 minutes, and the last one actually took me just under 30 minutes. But you got to remember that I'm cutting through end grain all the way down into this, because on a normal dovetail the pins are on the end grain, so you can cut in and then just hack out the little chisel in from the end, and it just pops little chips right off. You don't have that luxury when you're sideways, when the grain is going sideways through the dovetail. So I have to cut end grain twice, both on both sides instead of just once on the back. So it took a little longer than I had anticipated, but hey, we got them done. And the first one I drilled it out like that and then chiseled the whole thing out. And the first one I learned my lesson not to do it that way. But it wasn't all that bad. So the whole time I was doing this, the whole time I've been doing this project, every time I pick up a hand tool and start cutting wood like this, I started thinking of Chris over at Shop with Chris, and I forget the gentleman's first name, but his last name is Wright over at Wood by Wright, because they do everything with hand tools, those 2 guys, and that's not really me. I like to try my hand at it, you know, but I have other things that I need to get done, and so I'll use the power tools to speed things up, such as the drilling out most of the meat here, you know. There's one of those end grain places, and there's the other one. tell you, getting down into those inside corners at the back there, that's kind of a booger. The chisel is not shaped to get down in there. I have a full set of carving chisels, and I ended up pulling out one of them, a number 5 sweep 20 millimeter gouge, and that helped speed things along, but it's still not shaped to get down that corner. And I thought about it at the very end that I should go get the skew. I had, you know, a little carving skew, and I could have gotten that corner a lot easier, but you know, it's an afterthought. The first one dropped right in. It didn't go full depth, but the fact that it just slid right in there, I was like, oh yeah, that's great. The first one was the only one that did that. The rest of them I had to adjust the sides or the back or something, but they didn't all just slide in like that one. That was nice, but it just doesn't go that way every time. I did have to take a little bit more off the bottom of the hole though to get that depth that I needed. And now it fits. We're in good shape there. So, 7 more of them to go. And like I said, the 8th one I will also show you. You can see the difference in the technique that I use. So here's the last one of the 8. And the first thing I do is follow the lines around and cut a knife shelf in. And then I use that knife shelf to guide a, well, in this case, a back saw. And cut down to, well, as far as I can. And then instead of using a 1/2 inch bit on these first 2 holes, I use a 3/8, which got me closer into that corner and made that a little less work getting that corner out of there. And then I set the whole thing down on the floor, and I cut the 2 holes to the outside of the leg first, and then you can see how the chips just eject a lot easier. That made a big difference. And then the 3 holes at the back, because those 2 holes are up in front, eject a lot easier. So it made drilling them much faster. I discovered this technique on the 3rd hole, or the 3rd pocket that I cut. I went to the saw right away after the first one. That was easy. There's the gouge that I was using. It's a number 5 sweep 20 millimeter carving gouge, and it goes through this stuff a lot easier because the tips stick up out of the wood, and so it gets a nice clean cut. So that sped things up a bunch. Now I still had to go back with the straight chisel, of course, to clean everything up, because it does leave little ridges, if you will. And my camera angle here is not that great. Sorry about that. Yeah, see, that one didn't fit on the first try. fact, I think I have to do 2 or 3 here before I actually get it. Also used the plane to kind of take the lines from the bandsaw out of the end of the maple there too. And using that little square kind of tells me where my pocket sticks out inside, if it does. A little bit more. There it goes. Now I had to get the top 2 pieces for the ends. I had to cut the tenons on them because they're just getting Morrison tenon. I didn't butterfly or dovetail those in. I'll set the saw at 1/4 of an inch, or just a little under 1/4. And then cut a kerf all the way around on each end. And then, I don't know, this is the way that I do it. I've seen lots of guys like make 100 passes on the saw, but I just move it forward about 1/4 of an inch at a time and slide the board over to eat away the material. Dad showed me this trick a long time ago, and I still use it. So, at least I think it was Dad that showed it to me. I don't know. He showed me a lot of stuff. I've worked with a lot of cabinet makers and carpenters and whatnot, so I learned it somewhere down the road. Makes a reasonably smooth tenon as long as you move it in small increments. So with those guys all cut, I went over and started marking out for the mortises. And again, it was kind of a learning curve. The first time I marked out where I needed to start my holes in the wrong place. And I started using an auger because I'd be able to put the square up to it and make sure I was drilling straight. But the auger was dull, and so I put it away and went back to Forstner bit. And just figured I'd waller out the hole to make it work. And since I couldn't drill that last hole to get rid of the meat up there at that one end, I had to actually cut down little by little and pop it out of there. It worked. Just would have been nice to have more of that material out of the way. I still don't see how Chris, and I think his name is James Wright, but anyway, I don't see how they do it. I got pretty good patience, but they way beyond me. Alright, so let's get this thing put together, see what we look like. Or at least the base. So that's actually the second end. There's the first end. And then I got them approximately where they needed to be apart. And then here's the one of the side rails, and then the other side rail. And then I just wanted to make sure everything was going together square. And I measured this way, and it was 44 3/4. And I measured this way, and it was 44 7/8. So I did this. Then I measured, and it was 44 13/16, which sounded pretty good. And 44 13/16. Voila! It's actually square, and I barely had to move it. That was nice. I don't always get that lucky. So then I had to cut the tops of each of those posts. Those of you familiar with the traditional Roubo style bench know the shape. It's basically 2 tenons, and then the outside one is cut with a dovetail with the wide part to the inside. So I went back to the bandsaw. I do love this bandsaw. That's a 1/4 inch blade in there, and I'm cutting 5-inch thick white oak that's 150 or so years old. And that's a pretty tight radius. It was making me a little nervous, but I did it 4 times and it worked every time. So I'm only going to show you 2 of them, but yeah, it worked. Couldn't quite see my line there. I had to darken it with the pencil. Then those little tenons have to have a place to go. So here we're back over at the top, and I've marked out where it's going to go. The challenge I ran into here was that my drill bit, my little Forstner bit there, wasn't long enough to go all the way through, and I didn't have a bit that would go through that was big enough. So I actually had the challenge of trying to drill from one side and then flip it over and drill from the other side blind to get all the way through. After the fact, I thought, well, heck, I could have taken a smaller, like, spade bit and drilled down until the tip came through, then I would have known where to go. But that was after the fact. And as it turned out, it was actually a good thing I did it this way, because I wasn't drilling exactly straight. And since the leg has to go straight through, had I drilled all from one side, the hole would have been crooked. By doing this, as it ends up, the hole is exactly in the right place on both sides. All I have to do is make sure I've got a straight line between the two, and regardless of any voids inside of there, it'll work, as long as the top and the bottom line up in relation to the side. So accidentally I did it right. Chiseling these out was not hard. They actually was able to drill from end to end like that, so it was pretty easy. Flip it over to the other side. Took a little extra time doing this because I wanted it to fit right the first time, and it paid off. It went right in there, and here we are. Here's the leg, and boom, there it is. And then just to make sure I was correct, we put the cross member on there. Make sure it sits flat on the top, or on the bottom of the top, and it did. Was very happy about that. And then I thought, hey, you know what? I should flip this up and look at the other side and show it to the camera. So I moved some junk out of the way. Okay, it wasn't junk, it was tools, but still. And there you go. A little bit of gap to one side there, but that's okay because I plan on wedging the top down. And so that gap will be filled with wedge. Good to go. So that's as far as this video is going to take us. I will be back hopefully soon. The next video is already in edit, and we're going to get it assembled. We'll get all the doweling cut and put together, and yeah, it's kind of neat looking. So hope you guys are looking forward to it. We'll see you soon.